All right. Hey, Antonio, so glad to have you back on the Everything Saxophone podcast.
Hey Donna, how you feeling?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How about you?
Uh, Today's a good day so far. Just trying to stay positive.
Absolutely. I hear you. I hear you. And each day that's all we can really do, is how we impact the world. We stay positive as best as we can. Absolutely. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to go in a totally different direction than what I thought. We both have something similar in common, which is martial arts, the love for martial arts. And
Okay.
this is a saxophone podcast, but I wanted to talk to you a bit about that and how your love of martial arts has impacted not only your performing, but also, your teaching and even your composition, even your writing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's another discipline that encompasses everything that music does for me. The fundamentals in terms of technique, the history, the um, the appreciation of culture, the blending of spirit, and the highest level again to obtain to try to get to is to transcend the physical and the personal expression, but to reach the spiritual level of it. So it's a challenge, and I've been doing it for a long time, and it's a lot harder than music for me, I guess, because I feel a little more comfortable with music. That's my number one thing. But I found that studying martial arts now keeps me true, and it makes me address aspects of myself that music hasn't, or maybe I've overlooked over the years. So it's been very daunting. It's been very depressing at times. It's been very exciting at the same time, and it's wonderful to have something else besides my main passion. That's also an art as well to aspire to be, you know, good at one day.
Do you still go to the dojo and work out, or like have you achieved?
Yeah, of course, we can't do it now because of the pandemic, but yeah, I'm usually at the school no less than 3 times a week. I try to get at least 5 times a week. Um, excuse me. And then I was doing for several years. I was doing private lessons too, once a week with my teacher. I just stopped that because I just felt like there were a lot of fundamental things that I need to work on that I could work on by myself, and I could save some of that money. And then when I'm ready, I'll go back and start training privately with my Sifu again.
It's interesting the parallels with, I'm going to say, performing music because, when you think about it, you're at such a high level of playing, but we always work on the fundamentals there too. You never stop working on your tone. You never start working on your technique, mastering, the language of music. And it's true also with martial arts too, because everything, if you don't have a solid foundation, then the house falls down.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people in music have, like, I always tell my students, you have like 36 floors when you come to me, and floor 1 through 8 is empty. So what's going to happen is it's going to implode on itself. So why not like, really get these 8 floors solid? It doesn't take away from anything that you have already. It's just, making sure your foundation. See, in terms of martial arts, I've gone to several schools in New York for different reasons. The teacher, concept of school schedule, blah blah blah. Till I found the school that I'm at now. It's called City Wing Chun. I studied Wing Chun, and my seafood name is Alex Richter. And the thing I love about this school is because the way they approach it is like a curriculum. Like, I feel like I'm going to college actually. So there's a absolute structure. There's a curriculum for every level that we get to, and you can go and study. Everything is really like you're studying. You have to understand terms and vocabulary and all that stuff, as well as being able to articulate the technique through your action. So it works for me how my mind works. Sometimes it's a little too much. It's a little daunting because my teacher's a wealth of information. He studied with so many great masters, and he actually went to a school for Wing Chun in Europe. It was part of this. the European Wing Chun Association, EWTO, which was in Germany. I forgot what part of Germany, but it was they studied in a castle. So he studied 5 days a week for 3 years. I mean, he actually went to school to become an instructor and do that. And then once he left the castle, he studied with the grandmaster name is Kernspec. But once he left there, he went to Hong Kong to study the Hong Kong approach to our Wing Chun, which that school was kind of brought up, in that training with the grandmaster Lung Ting, who was if you know anything about Wing Chun, the last grand master of our system was, his name is Yip Man, Yipman. But they made a bunch of movies about him, fictional movies called Ip Man, IP Man. Right. So it's falsely based off of him. At least the first one is kind of close. The rest of them are like movies. So Lung Ting was the last private student of Yip Man before Yip Man died. So my teacher has that tradition. He has that, and he's gone and studied with a lot of the guys that were Yip Man students that are still alive. There's very few of them left. I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of them with him, and it's just incredible that to get that history. Like everybody talks about lineages, maybe in your martial arts too. I come from this lineage and all this stuff, and that's fine. It's nice to be of the Yip Man lineage, but what it comes down to is, can you use your martial arts or can't you? Period. Can you fight or can't you fight? So, but I love that school because, like I said, it was something that I was looking for, and I've always wanted to complete the Wing Chun system. I've been to many schools for different, like I said, I've left for different reasons, but I could never obtain my goal. And it seems like this is going to be a place where I can achieve my goal of completing the system. And then now I'm ready to learn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's great. I love it.
Wow. Okay. Couple of points here too, and I'm seeing the connections with learning music and learning jazz and lineage. And by the way, folks, if you haven't checked out our previous interview where Antonio goes, really deep into like jazz saxophone history in terms of, lineage and people to listen to and all that kind of stuff, definitely check it out. But absolutely with music, studying the masters, right? And you may not have a direct connection to a master per se, but just studying them and getting to understand the language and the history and how that impacted, that master's playing. It's the same thing with martial arts too. I'm curious, what made you choose Wing Chun as opposed to Taekwondo or Judo or something like that?
It's funny. I don't tell too many people this story, but of course, as a young child on Saturday afternoons, we have Kung Fu theater, and we would watch all the Kung Fu movies. And I don't know if that subliminally got in my head, but one day I remember one night I was laying in bed, and I was looking at the foot of my bed, and Bruce Lee was at the foot of my bed, and Bruce Lee was just in front of me. I remember this very clearly. He was doing all these hand gestures in front of me, right? And I didn't know what he was doing. I was just watching this, and then I saw this book in a store one day, and this guy was holding the ready position. And I was like, that's what Bruce Lee was doing. And it was like Wing Chun. That was it for me. Yeah. And getting back to Yip Man, the reason why a lot of people know about Wing Chun is because of Bruce Lee, because he was one of Yip Man's students, sort of. He was under Yip Man, but he studied with like his Si Hings, his big brother, a guy named Wang Sheng Le, was really like his main teacher. But because of Bruce Lee becoming famous in the United States, it brought celebrity to Wing Chun before Bruce Lee broke off and created his own style, the Jeet Kune Do. But it's all based off the foundation of Wing Chun.
That's so interesting. That's a great story to share. And it's interesting because I was just, before we came on, I was listening to some of your recordings, and I was listening to your Grammy-nominated recording, the album Here I Stand. I was listening to the tune Community, and then I was listening to something from your recent album, Blessings, and it was, actually it was two. It was A Hole in the Flute. I love that title.
Right.
And then Rock Candy. And it's interesting, like, just that perspective, 1997 to now. And the first word that came into my mind when I listened to the two more recent tunes was Zen. I felt like there was more, I felt it was just like a different different approach to how you were approaching your, I guess, compositions and your playing. And I love both, but that's what dawned on me. And maybe because I knew about the martial arts background, I'm not sure. But do you find that, actually, when did you start martial arts? That's a question I'm curious about.
Actually, I started when I was at Berkeley. I started studying a form of Shaolin called White Crane and Long Fist. I did that for a couple years. It was fine, but I stopped again because of the attitude of the school and the teacher. I didn't appreciate some of the stuff that was going on there. And plus, I was practicing really hard at that time. I was trying to learn how to play the saxophone, but it was always a passion. But then when I came to New York, I was working with Roy then, and I wanted to study again. That's when I started looking for schools, and I went through, going through the phone book and looking for different schools, visited different schools, and, and then found places that I would stay for a couple of years. The last school before the school I'm now, I was there for like 9 years. And so I have a lot of years of studying. If I was in one place, the right place, I probably, I could be at a different level. But when you leave schools, even though, say, I'm going to different Wing Chun schools, I still have to pretty much start from the beginning. Yeah. Even though I have knowledge, because there might be conceptually something might be a little different in the philosophy of how it's taught, even though I understand it. So it helps me move a lot faster. So when I came to my school, of course, I started lower, but I was able to rise a lot faster because I had history. I just had to tweak some things. But that was something too. They always talk about empty your cup. Don't come with like so much information. You know that story, right?
Yeah.
So for people who don't know the story, there was this guy that was trying to talk to a monk about Buddhism. At least this is the way I was told the story. So as they were sitting down having a conversation, before the monk could say anything, this guy was telling them everything, spelling everything that he knew about Buddhism. So as the monk is sitting there, he starts pouring tea. So the guy's talking, and he's pouring tea to where the tea is overflowing. These guys, hey man, what's going on? Why are you pouring so much tea? He said, this is like you. He said, you have so much filled up in your cup, you're not even ready to receive what I had to give you. Yeah. So I because I studied somewhere else and I came with some knowledge, what I thought was, some knowledge, I had to go inside myself, and it was a constant struggle of getting rid of the ego and saying, look, this is the place you want to be. You see that the knowledge you're getting here is what you want. So you have to you have to go back. It doesn't matter that you were at the third form. Right now, you're at the first form. And, like I said, it was always a struggle. Like one day I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I did damn, I know this already, or I think I know this already. And once I kind of let go of that ego part of it, then I was able to digest and actually move further along faster than I would not have had I kept on pushing it, not emptying in my cup. So, yeah, I love it.
That's a hard concept too when you think about it. And I'm just thinking too in terms of you're the director of jazz at Queens College, Aaron Copland School of Music, and I'm just thinking about the new students that come in every year, and in a sense, yeah, they absolutely have to have a certain amount of knowledge, but in some ways they also have to empty the cup in order to be able to receive more.
Yeah, it's been really almost every semester or every new year when I get a new student. It depends, but I usually have to, and it's really unfortunate that I have to break them down. It's almost like a whole semester that I have to break them down to show them what they don't know.
What do you mean by that? Break them down. What do you mean?
I have to show them. I have to really show them, you don't know this. You don't know that. You really don't know that. You think you do? Show me. You can't do it. I thought you knew it. It's
okay.
You have to go through that whole process to where they say, wow, I really don't know that. And then now we're ready to learn instead of coming in again with an empty cup. Just because you're a master student, you're older, and maybe you've made records and you've toured. The reason why you came to school is because you want knowledge. Knowledge is free. It doesn't negate anything that you have or that you've learned or what you've done. There's no disrespect. But if you're coming into my studio, I'm assessing what I'm hearing. And you're supposed to trust me coming into my studio that I'm going to lead you in the right way. I'm not going to teach you because I can't teach you anything, but I'm going to lead you in a direction that will help you get to things. And also, what my job as your coach is to be honest with you, and you're getting 30 years of playing with the best in the world. You know, so like my job isn't to come in and make you feel bad, like, oh, you suck. No, it's not that. My job is to say, well, why don't you pay attention to this? You know, and then once you digest that, you can do it. Say, okay, this is why I told you to do that. This is why. Now we can move on. So a lot of times they come in and they just do it on a superficial level, or they do it and then they forget. I'm saying, well, we can't move any further. Everything I'm giving you is like a building block, and we're putting parts to an engine together. But if you don't know why this is important and how to snap this on, we can't go to part 3. So now we got to stay in part 1 and part 2. Now you decided to do it. Now we move on to part 3, and that's cool. And this is the first semester, where in the first semester we can have 10 parts of that engine together. You know, maybe we have 4 or 5 because of what the student does. So yeah, and sometimes I get students that are so hungry that every week I got to make sure that I have it together, because they're going to come in ready. But it's not all the time. You know, I used to get frustrated about that, but it's the way I teach. And anybody that comes to my studio, I'm like, this is it. Foundation, fundamentals. You know, yeah, you hear me playing with different people and you hear all the stuff I'm doing with Dave Holland and people. I'll give it to you. It's yours. Nothing I own belongs to me anyway. But I'm not going to show you that stuff until you show me that you understand the language. You know how to do certain things, that you have a certain proficiency on your instrument. Because I'm just giving you tools. I'm giving you a toolbox, and you don't even know how to use this tool. So you're going to mess it up. You know, I want you to have a toolbox where everything, oh, this is a wrench. This is how you do it. This is a certain kind of wrench. This is certain kinds of pliers. These certain kinds of whatever. I don't deal with tools. But you know what I mean? It's like I'm showing you how to use each part. You know, now you had to do that. Now, this is how somebody that's not really advanced, we would use this. But because you know how to do this now, we would use this tool. You know what I mean? And it makes it a lot faster. It's a lot more efficient. So that's what I do. And like I said, sometimes it gets not so much anymore. It gets frustrating because that first semester, like I said, I have to say, you don't know this, you don't know. And it's like it's like me chastising, but it's not. It's just like I want you to say, yeah, I don't know this, but I will, and then we can have fun.
Did anybody do that for you? Like, where did you come up with this? You know, the way you're saying this to me right now with, you know, I use the same terminology too, like toolbox and that kind of thing, but who did this for you in your life?
Well, you know, honestly, I was that student that just did what you told me to do. You know, I like I told you before, when I went to Berkeley, I was the lowest kid on the totem pole. I was the bottom of the bunch, you know, so anything my teachers told me, I did because I wanted to rise in the ranks. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to be able to play with the good players in school. So you didn't have to tell me to practice my scales. You didn't have to tell me to practice my AT. You didn't have to tell me to transcribe. You didn't have to tell me to listen. You know, you didn't have to tell me to go out and hear live music. That's what I was there for, you know. And when one thing I didn't talk about, when I got to Berkeley, I got there to Boston on a Monday, and Wednesday I was working. You know, so like I had full-time jobs the whole time I was in college.
Oh, okay.
You know, I worked, my first job I worked for back then to get like long distance phone company, was something called MCI or something. And you would call people and say, would you like to have MCI? You know, and people hang up on you, or you get some weirdo that want to talk to you and get to read this whole spiel. And that's the first thing I did. You know, I did that for a couple months. I went from there. Then I worked in a bank in the Prudential Center in Boston, reading fiche. Back then they had these fiche of people that had dormant accounts, and you had to call them and say, look, you got $5,000. If you don't claim it, it's going to go to the government. So I was doing that, and I would go take a lunch break, take class, and come back and do that. From there, I worked in the Berkeley box office. I worked in the Berkeley library, and my last job was I was working in the Sheraton Hotel in the basement folding towels.
Wow.
that was my last job before I started before I graduated and started my career. But, the whole time I was in school, I had a job because that was how I was going to survive. I had to work. So I wish I had that time where I could have just practiced all day long and went to class and just totally focused on my studies. But I didn't have that financial back, and it was no fault of anybody. It just was my story.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking in my head, gosh, how did you do everything? How were you able to accomplish everything? Because when you think about it, yeah, going to school full time, it's a big load, and then on top of that, as musicians, we're trying to practice to, it's not just doing classwork, it's also practicing to be able to perform. And then I'm thinking, were you also gigging at the same time too?
Later on, the later years at Berkeley, I was starting to perform around town. But I mean, I just wanted it, and this was how I was going to school. I took out loans, and Berkeley gave me a little assistance. And I don't even get into that story because I'll get angry. But yeah, so I had to work, and that was it. I had no choice. It was either work or not go to school. And I had a couple great friends that had to leave school because they couldn't get scholarships and they just couldn't afford it. And I knew this was like this was my ticket out or whatever. I just thought, I'm going to take advantage of this, and if I have to sacrifice at this time, I'll do it. And I did a lot of things besides working in those places. Sometimes there was like these bands, because you had parts of Massachusetts that were like all speaking Spanish, like Lawrence, Mass, and places where the whole community just spoke Spanish. So we were playing these merengue bands, and the merengue bands they would rehearse at Berkeley, and then they would get Berkeley guys. And in fact, myself, Mark Turner, there were several of us. Every weekend we were playing merengue bands. So you make an event, you make a couple $100 for the weekend. You're doing pretty good. So we did all kinds of that. Did all kinds of like wedding gigs, hotel gigs. I worked with a singer in Boston. I wish I could find her. Her name was Eula Lawrence. She was an amazing singer, but I learned how to play standards and how to back up a singer from her. It was a great education. So I had a lot of different kind of planning. I did like some like calypso stuff. This lady Gypsy Rose Lee. I was just talking about that the other day to somebody. The Mighty Sparrow. So I did a lot of different kinds of gigs in Boston. But yeah, as well as working. But I practiced all the time. And at that time, I really didn't have social skills, because if I didn't have like my headphones on listening to music, I wasn't really talking to people. I would go through the halls, give them a head nod, and go into practice room and practice, because I didn't have time to waste. Some of the guys I knew were on full scholarships or had family help, so they could chill out and lay in the bed and chase chicks and do stuff like that. I was like, I don't really have that luxury. I really don't have that luxury. But I did have a social life. I joined a fraternity, and my fraternity allowed me to spend time on different campuses. I spent time on all the campuses: Harvard, MIT, Tufts, Wellesley, Brown, UConn. So I met some intelligent brothers that were like in a whole nother thing other than music. So I got a chance to see all that side of it too. So I did have a college life, but it wasn't hard. I mean, it wasn't easy. It was an uphill struggle to get that degree.
Wow, and actually your college life was more, it wasn't a party life. It was actually a work life when you think about it. You were really, what's so impressive is your work ethic.
Like I said, it's if you want something, you do what it takes. You sacrifice. Did I want to get up and put on a tie and go to that bank? Hell no. Did I want to do any of that stuff? No. I mean, working in the Berkeley Library was killing, because they gave me a bunch of old downbeats. I have them still here. They like downbeats from like different years. I think I have them 1955 to like 1980 something, and it's like the whole year.
Oh.
Like let's see. It's like
how cool.
Let me see. Like this is like, see, it's like.
Oh, and that's nicely bound and everything?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's like, this is what, 1973, and they were redoing them. So they gave them to me. So like I have like, and I still haven't read through all these, but there's like all this history of the whole year of downbeat of 1973. I have it right here.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's really cool. So that was one of the best things that came out of work in the library because they gave them to you. They were heavy, and I kept them all these years. But you know, that's history. That's serious history right there.
That's seriously valuable stuff. Absolutely.
I think so.
Oh my gosh, such a great magazine, and it still is. You know, it still is today. That's
Oh
crazy.
yeah, I mean, yeah, they. I mean, we're lucky because I mean, jazz is and downbeat. I'm sure there are a couple other that I don't know, but you know, before it was like you had Japan, you had Swing Journal, and magazines out of the country that really paid a lot of respect to our music. And thank God for these magazines because they've been very nice to me and all my friends all these years. So I'm glad we still have them. I'm glad they think our music is still relevant to be loved and shared.
Absolutely. And you know, going back to the work ethic thing too, just you know, reading your bio and stuff, and one of the big turning points in your life was when you were in ninth grade and how music and the arts were going to be cut from school.
Right,
And
right.
as your bio said, you know, like music was the one thing that like brought you to school. So one thing you look forward to. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I was teaching in public schools, I knew those kids that felt the exact same way. And you know, it's such a devastation when those types of budget cuts happen, and they're so stupid when you think about it. But anyway, in order for you to keep, you know, passionate about life and stuff, you wanted to audition for the high school for the performing arts, and you had to work really hard to do that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, yeah, I guess we didn't talk about that. Um, yeah, I had a friend that went to the junior high school I went to. He got accepted into the school, and I remember telling my teacher at the time that I wanted to go to school. He said, "Oh, you won't get in. You're not good enough." You know, just the whole negative thing. You're not talented enough, and I got in, and
Now
you
look at
know,
you.
he really got mad at me for years. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he got mad at me because he thought I never claimed him as my teacher. And I said, why would I claim you as a teacher? I said, you told me what I wasn't. You know, you did some things that weren't cool, and I don't respect you. So no, I don't claim you as a teacher. So, but anyway, um, I I I got this call from the school. My mom got the call saying they were going to audition me on a Monday. So I think it was a Friday that I found out. And I was on the phone with my friend Timmy, and we had this book, the saxophone book called the University Method Book. It's like an old book of etudes and scales and things like that. And there was a piece called Hungarian Dance Number 5. Dun, 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 I remember it. So for like 2 hours on the phone, we just went over that piece. We just kept on going over and over and over it. Because, you know, I knew scales, but I wasn't really reading that well at the time. So Monday morning, my mom and stepfather took me down to this place downtown on 712 Cathedral Street. And it looks like a hotel because that's what it was. It was a hotel converted into a school. And you get in, and I'm just nervous. And I don't remember. Somebody came and said, "We're going to take you up the steps into this room." So I guess my parents waited, and I went to a room with 3 people. My teacher Chris Ford, a lady named Carolyn Fawkes, and I don't remember who the third person was now. So they were like, "Welcome, and can you play these scales?" And I played the scales. And then they said, "Well, you prepared a piece." I said, "Yeah." So I played Hungarian Dance Number 5, but I kept on making a mistake in this one measure.
Oh, I remember that.
So my teacher was like, "Well, can you read that measure again?" And I guess I did it 2 or 3 times. He said, "What? Are you reading that?" And I said, "I think I am." He said, "Well, you know, how did you learn this?" I said, "Over the phone a couple of days ago. I practiced it over the phone and did it." And at that point, I really thought, well, I'm not getting in because even though the School for Arts was a public school, you had to audition. So we had music, we had visual arts, we had dance, and we had theater. And as well as your academics. So I didn't think I was going to get in. And sure enough, like a week later, I got an acceptance letter. So I started maybe a couple weeks late, but I got in, and it was a total culture shock. I'm going to school with different ethnicities that I never went to school with. Seeing little girls running around school in leotards. I'm young man, just all the different sexualities that people are exploring at that particular time. It was just like a total culture shock. And then academically, I was not supposed to be there. I mean, because they were very serious. And where I went before, I wasn't prepared. I was not prepared, and I thought I was going to get kicked out because academically I just was not there. I went to summer school for a couple classes, and it was a struggle. It was even to the point where they thought I might have had like some kind of learning disability. They were going to let me stay for music, but go somewhere else to take academics. I was like, hell no, no way. I said I can do this. I just need time. So many days with my knees on my knees praying to God, saying, look, God, I don't want to go back to where I came from. I need to stay here. And I just applied myself. Not that I became an excellent student academically, but I was able to pass and function, through divine intervention, hard work, and teachers that weren't going to let you be mediocre. That was the whole thing at the School for the Arts. They were like, we're treating you guys like professionals now. So certain things you have to do, like showing up on time, being prepared, all these things, really be diligent. Those are things that were ingrained in me at 14 years old that I still carry on now. But anyway, yeah, so I got into the school, and it was some really, really hard times. And again, at the bottom of the totem pole, it's funny, that's my life, right? And, cats laughing at me, coming in, oh, you sound horrible. Just everything that kids do, they're cruel.
Wow.
And again, rose through the ranks and, graduated and then got into Berkeley, and the rest is history. But that school is pretty amazing, still amazing. And it has so many great players that have come out after us, because before it was more European classical oriented. And then the jazz thing came after like my class, and you have like saxophone players, Tim Green, you have Warren Wolf, you have Lee Pearson, and a bunch of guys that are on the scene now that have come out of the high school after me. So it's really Jada Pinkett went there, Tupac went there, a bunch of dancers from Alvin Ailey. I mean, and now even like people I don't even know that are like on TV and doing great things that have come from that school. So I'm really proud to be like in one of the first classes. But that place, and Dr. Chris Ford, who's the director now, who's my teacher, now he's a director. He's responsible for taking like this inner city kid that was not disciplined, didn't know anything, from a level of 0 to like 8.5 by the time he graduated, So I'm always thankful to him as that's a teacher that I always have to thank, always, forever.
And this is really actually a fascinating story, but when you think about it, if you weren't receptive to doing what the teacher said, if you didn't say to yourself, I've got to apply myself, we wouldn't be talking right now, and it's so funny how you say you feel like you were at the bottom of the heap, and yet I think, God, he's an amazing player. It's like we see the not the final result, of course, but we see you like now and even in 1997 and all that kind of thing. And yet it's so good for people to hear the struggles that you go through and how you got out of that. Because if we do apply ourselves and if we get the right mentorship, right, that was huge. You get the right mentorship between him and between Jimmy Heath, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But you could do amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell students, it's just, everybody wants to play the vanguard. Everybody wants to do recordings. Everybody wants to tour the world. That's wonderful, and that's a blessing. It's a true blessing that I've been able to have. And to be totally honest, it was never a dream of mine. That's the funny part of my story is I never dreamed of moving to New York. I never dreamed of making records. I never thought about touring the world. My thought was, because I started so late, was to just go to school, go be the first in my family, get my degree, get my master's, get my PhD, go back to Maryland and be a teacher, have a family, have kids. And I said, if maybe one day somebody might let me record on a record, I'll be happy if I'm good enough to do that. And it turned out that, it's come full circle in terms of teaching. I didn't get the PhD or the DMA, but I've been able, to tour the world many, many times. And and now I'm being an educator. So it's like, but I never dreamed, and I've been in New York for like 30 years. I never wanted to live here. This was not my dream. This was, was not anything that I thought about. But I know people, that's what they live for, right? I want to do this. I'm going to play with this person. I'm this. I didn't think that. I just got really, really lucky, real blessed. One thing I can say is I worked hard and I prepared myself for it, and of course there are people I wanted to play with, and some of them I have and some of them I haven't at this point. But, I never had that, going to New York and making it, getting a piece of the apple. Nah, because I didn't think that was going to happen for me, to be totally honest. When I heard these young guys coming in and they could play already, the Mark Turners, he might be a little older than me though. Mark Turners and Chris Cheek and Seamus Blake and Ingrid Jensen and all these players that were like good, very young. I was like, that's why I practiced so hard, because I was like, I want to be in that. I want to be in that class. I want to be with these guys. Yeah. It's I'm really. I have to pinch myself sometimes, because if heaven forbid, if I'm not able to play ever again, I've had the most amazing career. Everything is like icing because I didn't dream it. So it's all the icings and the sprinkles and everything that's on top of the cake.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting to hear. My gosh, when okay, I guess my question is though, you're going to Berkeley, you're taking your courses and classes and all that kind of stuff. When did things start really happening for you to get, to play with all these great players?
I mean, the thing with Berkeley, at least what it was back then, was you had pockets of different kinds of musicians. You had the straight ahead guys, you had the guys that were like kind of R&B, pop. There were like these different schools. You had the heavy metal cats. You had, it was just all these different things. So you had these circles, and then one of the places that we would go to is called Wally's Cafe. That was like the proving ground outside of campus, and that was where the jam sessions were. That's where that's where you took your licks, and the objective was to get the gig at Wally's, because if you got the gig at Wally's, that meant on some level you were an up and comer. It was known that you had that gig, you were up and comer. And I think Greg Osby had it, maybe Donald Harrison, Bradford Marcellus. All these people had that gig while they were at Berkeley. So, after a couple of years, I was able to get the gig. And it was great because we were playing like every week, a couple nights a week. I mean, we would play for like 5 hours, make $15 and happy.
Yeah.
You made enough money so you could, after you finish, you go get some French fries and chicken wings or something, and you were happy. And you came back the next day and did it. But also, we were learning songs. We were learning compositions, learning standards, and testing ourselves, changing keys and all that stuff on a regular basis. So I think Wally's was like the thing that helped me a lot. And of course, a lot of different sessions at Berkeley. We played a lot. I mean, we played 7 days a week. It was a lifestyle. And then again, I've had some great teachers like Bill Pierce, who got me right at the beginning, who really gave me some great foundation. I wasn't quite ready for Bill Pierce yet, but he set me on my way. And then I had another teacher, Andy McGee, who took me in another direction and made me go back, and listen to all the older musicians. And then I had Joseph Viola, who was like the classical teacher, the guru. I had him for a little while, but again, I don't think I got the most out of him as I could, because I wasn't at the maturity level yet. But I can say he was my teacher for a little while. But and just having your classmates push you, it was like we really you want to cast to accept you. You want to you want to cast, oh, he's sad, nah, you can't play. You want to cast to be like, yeah, or cast do something, do recitals, and they come to you to do their recitals. And that was what was happening. I was getting called to do recitals. I was getting called to do. I remember when we first got there, they had these things called Singer Showcase, where they would put these shows together, and I guess the students auditioned for them at the time, and they would sing, and have a band play. I said, I'm gonna be in that band one day. That was my objective. I remember the first week of school, and it got to the point where whenever they did something, I was in that band. I was always in the horn section. When Dizzy Gillespie came, I was in the band. When Jack D's and that came, I was in the band. When Louis Belson, I was in that band. You know, that was my objective, to be in that circle. Some trials and things I don't want to talk about, with being in Boston and some things that went on at Berkeley, but it was I just wanted it. You know what I mean? Pure and simple. I just wanted it, and I wanted to know who the best players were there, and those are the people that I wanted to be around. You know, my peers were cool, but I wanted to be around the best players. And when people came to town, I made sure that I introduced myself to them and met them. You know, meeting Charlie Rouse and Buster Williams and Kenny Barron when I was a kid, meeting Benny Carter, meeting Freddie Hubbard, you know, going to see Tony Williams and J.J. Johnson, and, you know, seeing a lot of people when they came to town. I took a lesson with George Coleman one time, you know, meeting Mulgrew Miller, meeting Kenny Garrett, who became a mentor, you know, just being serious. You know, some guys were nice to me, some guys weren't so nice, and it was cool. I didn't care. I just wanted information. So if you weren't nice, it would be nice if you gave me a lesson and showed me something. If not, I just transcribe your CD. The same difference, you know, just less time. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't want to show it to me, you're playing it on your recording. It would help me if you just tell me what it was. But some guys didn't. I just transcribe it.
Wow. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Let me ask you this question. First of all, I have to say this. Your mindset is awesome because, you know, you had to have a really strong mindset in order to almost be like the comeback kid in a sense. Like each time, like getting into the high school for the performing arts, you're feeling like you're the low end on the totem pole. Then getting to Berkeley, feeling like I've got to get better, and just having the mindset of always wanting to be with the top people, and being with the top people makes you a top person, you know, as opposed to, you know, in some ways it is good to be the little fish in a big pond because you have somewhere to swim to, you know, as opposed to the big fish in a little pond where, you know, people rest on their laurels and stuff like that. But Roy Hargrove was one of your classmates too, and I know I love Roy's playing. It's such a shame that he passed. It really, I was just shocked. It was so sad, and I know he was a dear friend to you.
Yeah, I would show people this. See
Yeah,
that?
I saw that on the Jazz Is interview, and that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's just
Yeah.
beautiful. He had
Yes,
a
my man. I
sound.
look at him every day.
Oh my God, he had a sound. He had just his concepts of playing, and oh wow. Well, let me get past that for right now. But could you talk about how you guys met and how you formed that friendship and what came from that?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about that and all that. We met at Wiley's, that place I told you. And the year before, Roy was already, I guess he was 16, 17. He had already started recording and touring. So we knew that this hot shot was coming to Berkeley, and we wanted to see who he was. And he came down to Wiley's, and he proved who he was. You know, he played well, and he had something special, something we hadn't heard from a young guy at least. And actually, so we played a lot down at Wiley's. He probably was down at Wiley's more than me. Like, Roy was known to be the jam session guy from everybody. Like, when I was in the band, we closed every jam session down around the world. And that started at Berkeley, but I'm sure it was even before he even got to Berkeley. And there was a band formed by one of the Marsalis brothers, Delphio Marsalis, the trombonist. And we put this band together to do a competition. And it was, I was in the band, Roy, Delphio, tenor player Chris Cheek, a piano player named Julian Joseph, who's in England, Masahiko Osaka, a drummer from Japan. I forgot the bass player, and it was a vocalist named Tim Owens, who's in LA, I believe. So we went to this, it was the Heineken Jazz competition. I think it was in San Diego or somewhere. And it was a collegiate competition, and we won. We got our award taken away from us, but we won first, and I want to get into why we got it taken away from us. But we that's when Roy and I found out we had this kind of connection playing together, and so we did like music fests and things like that, and we just had this lock, and it wasn't like we talked a lot to each other. We talked, but not that much. So when Roy kind of left, I think he was still coming. He was still in school. but he was supposed to stay at my house for a couple weeks before school started. He didn't show up. And his manager called for him and said, you know where Roy is? I was like, I don't know. He didn't show up. And at that moment, I said, well, this is an opportunity. I said, well, what are you looking for in your artist? I mean, I just took a chance. He said, well, Roy's been telling me about you. He said, if something happens, something comes up, I'll definitely keep you in mind. So I didn't think anything of it.
Wow.
This is when I'm folding towels, right? So like a week later, his manager called me and he said, what are you doing this Saturday or something like that? I said, I'm school. He said, no, you're not. You're going to be in New York playing at Birdland with Roy.
Wow.
And that's what happened. You know, we went down, we played at Birdland, the old Birdland. It's on 45th or 44th now, but it was up on 102nd Street. Not the real Birdland, that was the crowd, in the 50s. But we played, it was with Jimmy Cobb, Walter Booker, and Ronnie Matthews. That was the first time I played in New York. And we did that gig, and from then, I think that's when the record companies were looking at Roy. He had got signed to RCA, and he asked me to be on his first record, and we toured, and the rest is history. Then I got signed, and I think we did about 5 or 6 recordings together before he was on my first recording, and it was magical. Again, magical because it wasn't anything that I was thinking about. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It was like almost like being in this tornado of things happening. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm in New York. Wow. Jackie McLean. Wow. People, they know my name. And then cats were mad. I met a lot of diversity, a lot of cats like, who are you? They used to call me college boy. I'm just a college boy from Boston. I mean, I'll tell you stories, and again, you said that story about being the lowest person on the totem. I was just thinking about that. Like my whole life, I was told that I wasn't this or not good enough or anything. And I think if it wasn't for some kind of inner will that I never thought about, or people or something, I could have just said, yeah, I'm not shit. I'm not good. And I'm, excuse my language, but if something said, no matter what they said, it wasn't like, I'm going to show you. It wasn't even about that. It was just like, I still have to do this. It hurts. It hurts that you're telling me this. It hurts that I can't be friends with you, or whatever reason, but I still got to do this. I still have to do this. And it's nice being at this age now where I don't feel like I have to prove anything to anybody anymore. It's like, if you don't think I can play at this point, you never will. If you don't like my music, you won't. It's fine. But I just do what I do. I'm just Antonio Hart. I do what I do. I've made a career of 30 years. It's all documented, and I'll just keep on moving on, and I've evolved as a person. That 21-year-old is different from a 51-year-old. So, there were some hiccups in there, but I just try to be a good person and try to be the best musician, the best teacher. I mean, when you took class from me, I have to apologize because I don't think I was a great teacher at that point. I think I'm a very good teacher now. I think I'm a very, very good teacher now. Then those were the beginning years of trial and error. Even though I do have a degree in music education, nothing prepares you for being in the classroom. I don't care what method courses you take. It's just like being on the bandstand. You go to school and you practice and all this stuff, but when you play with the cats, that's when you're really going to school. That's when you're in the trenches. That's when you're really learning. So, I feel thankful for all these things because it allows me to be better. It allows me to reflect on mistakes and try to be better. And it also, for my students, they're lucky if they pay attention because I can say, these are the mistakes that I made. So now you don't have to make them. So instead of going down Casino Boulevard, I'm going to take you down Main Street. So you're not going to get that, But some of them, they want to go down Casino Boulevard. So I'm like, and then they come back later. Antonio, I should have went down Main Street. Well, you had to find that out for yourself.
Yeah, and that's usually the case. But I will say, I thought you were a good teacher back then, and like I told you, and I'm not just making this up. I never forgot that class, and the listening that we did, and how you made the recordings for us if we asked for it, And I did you asked, we had to do a final project or whatever, and I did mine on Mary Lou Williams, and I never, even thought about studying um, other instrumentalists, as much as like, trumpet at the time, so
Right.
that was awesome. That was awesome for me. And I never forgot it. Like I said, and you're right. People don't realize this too. Yeah. Teaching, there used to be the saying that, those that can't teach, but that's a bunch of crap, because you don't realize how hard it is to teach people, and there's so many different ways that people learn and so many different personalities in a classroom. And I love the analogy that you said of, hey, you go to school for performance, you're practicing. Yeah, you're playing in your school groups, but you're not really learning until you're on the bandstand in real life.
It's true. I mean, I did all those method courses. I did, philosophy of education, I did all that stuff. And when you get in there and you're like, I mean, of course, some of that stuff is you can use it, you have to tweak it, but nothing prepares you for being out there on the road, and having a mentor or master telling you, like Frank West in the Dizzy Band telling me, cut that note off, no vibrato, playing too loud. And of course you get your feelings hurt, but you be like, well, this is the master. He knows what it's supposed to sound like. I'm playing second to him. Whatever he tells me to do, I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And after 13 years, now I'm playing lead. But I have all of that tutelage from him, so I can tell the other person, play too loud. That's gonna. Yeah, it's great. It's hard sometimes. I can't lie. Sometimes it's very frustrating because I want to practice more and I'm just so tired from teaching.
Yeah.
Or meetings and things like that, or I want to practice my martial arts and I'm just too tired, or I want to read something. It's all about time management, and it's just finding out, making priorities. What is important, what's not important. But you would think we all have all this time right now because of the pandemic and staying home in New York, but then there's a psyche, an emotional, spiritual thing going on right now where everybody's locked and forced. I'm an only child, and I don't have a family yet. I hope to have one, but I'm used to being alone and entertaining myself. I've done it my whole life. But I told somebody the other day, I said, it's one thing to be home, be alone because you want to be, and then there's one way to be home and alone because you have to
be. Yeah.
It's two different things, and it's trying to get it together. All my friends that I talk to, everybody's feeling it because most of the musicians, well, none of them are working. Yeah. So some people depend on touring. They depend on gigs. I lost a lot of money in tours too, but fortunately I have, my teaching gig, thank God, but a lot of people don't have that. So through teaching, I was able to buy my apartment. Like I own my apartment. I don't have a mortgage anymore. I was kind of good with money because I grew up with no money. So like I was like, I have to know how to manage my money and do things like that so I don't live beyond my means and things like that. And I thank Master Heath for bringing me into Queens College. I know we're going to get to him in a second, but yeah, it's we're just living in a rough time. But I'm praying that we get through this and better, and we make some changes in terms of everything. You see a lot of stuff that's coming to the surface now, but they could come to the surface and go back under again if people don't really want that change to happen. So let's see what happens in November.
No, that's very true, and that's so true in life. I mean, I remember 9/11, and that was the first year that I was teaching in public school. And when the first plane hit, I wasn't aware. We don't have like TVs in school and whatnot. And I remember I was calling a parent to try to convince her to have her son go from alto to tenor sax because
right.
I mean, it's stupid now, right? But she said, "Did you hear what happened?" I'm like, "No." And she said, "A plane hit the World Trade Center." I'm like, "What?" And as a teacher at the time, you had to keep it together because you have a room full of kids. You don't want to lose it in front of them. And we didn't have all the details, but there were a lot. I was working in Syosset, and there was a lot of kids that their parents were working in those buildings. And my uncle was in one of those buildings. He made it out by the skin of his teeth. That's a whole other story. But
yeah,
that was something, you know. And the thing is, for the longest time in New York, you know, especially downtown, people were very, it was, they were not the typical New Yorker in the sense like everybody's very nice to each other. You know, it was like a
Yeah, you remember that?
yeah,
Yeah,
it was like, wow.
yeah,
But it lasted quite a while. It really did. And what I mean by quite a while, I mean like, you know, months to about a year or so. Um, but, you know, we don't ever, as a New Yorker, you never forget 9/11. But, you know, we've gone through so many things since then. I have a strong feeling that we're not going to be forgetting what's going on right now. I do think huge change is going to be coming. It's just too much. It's enough. You know what I mean? It's enough. People have had enough, and I think huge change will come. And it's the unfortunate thing is you have the pandemic on top of, you know, someone being killed, you know, killed by a policeman, you know, two bad things happening at once. It's a lot for people to take. And you know, you mentioned the psyche. Yeah, absolutely. I see it in my friends too. Um, who are mainly performers and just don't feel like practicing, you know, because it's just so.
yeah. I mean, that happens for all of us. You know, I look at my horn, I'm looking at the flute over there, and I want to. I mean, part of me wants to, or pick up one of my martial arts weapons, or do a form, and I want to, but it's just like you have to get to a point where you just do it anyway. You know, and I'm gonna get to that, but and you have to continue to practice. We had a jam session. One of my friends had a jam session outside. Of course, we're 6 feet away from each other, but it was just
Oh, cool.
so amazing to play. But everybody was rusty. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
playing and I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, ah, you know. So still got to keep your knife sharp. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out artistically and with musicians and the music that they create, and how we are able to connect with the community, because of, you know, with the distancing and jazz clubs and touring around the world. I mean, everything's at a halt right now, you know, and we just don't know what's going to happen, at least for the next year or so. So it's even in terms of academia, you know, we have students from a lot of different parts of the world that might not want to come back to the United States
Yeah.
because of what's happening. I don't blame them, you know. So we just have to wait and see, and just be prayerful, and just keep on moving forward. I guess try to change some of this negative energy to positive if enough people think that way. It
I
it it'll change. It's everything's yin and yang. We just in one of those periods, but it has to change. So, and we'll get out of it.
I think so. And, you know, I think people are going to be more creative. I think it was when we were talking after our last interview. You know, I know a bunch of people that are very much into technology and, you know, like these online ways of jamming with people all over the world, like Jam Kazam and Jamulus. And a lot of people are doing that. And I'm sure like some people with really smart brains are trying to find a way to get rid of that latency issue, you know, so that people, you know, I'm in LA, you're in New York, you know, people can jam, can perform at the same time, you know, as opposed to, you know, the stuff you see on like the television show The Voice, where that was really cool, where they had the, you know, the singers being able to perform from their homes, and, you know, the band had to, of course, send around files and, you know, and get the tracks working for these artists. I'm sure that there's going to be technology coming out of this where people can do something like this, because the reality is, it's not a sad thing, but the reality is that this virus is going to come back in a second or a third wave, you know, until there's a way that we can build some immunity to it. And so as musicians, we have to find ways to get past that, you know, in terms of performing and getting things out, you know, to the public. And yeah, and actually, to be honest with you, like you said, there's going to be, like you said last time, there's going to be beautiful things that are going to come out of struggle. And I think there's going to be beautiful works of art that are going to be coming out of this struggle. And, you know, we've yet to see them, but I think they will definitely be happening.
Yeah, I think, I mean, technology is part of forever now, for sure. But, you know, nothing's going to replace playing in the same room, or
Oh, true.
playing for people. You know, you can stream, and that's wonderful. That's some places that I think Smalls maybe, or the Vanguard of places are starting to stream, which is amazing and it's wonderful. because, and I was thinking about that because, you know, now somebody could hear a band at the Vanguard in Philippines or somewhere, you know what I mean? So it definitely broadens the audience, but as a performer, you get your inspiration from playing in front of people, you know, so it's going to be a different situation, different time. And I play out what I just want to get back to getting to my music and writing. So when the right time comes, I'll be ready. So, but yeah, I'm curious because there's definitely going to be some genius or geniuses that are going to come up with these programs that will fix all those problems that you're talking about. And I mean, they've been doing it for a long time. And actually, there are a few programs that are pretty good right now, but it's going to get better.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting too, you mentioned Smalls. Out here, the baked potato has been starting to, the last few weeks, honestly, has been starting to live stream, not on Zoom, just some other type of apparatus. And yeah, what's great is that you can hear, you know, like Eric Marienthal, and if you're living in the Philippines, you know, and for just for a couple of bucks or something like that. I think what this is going to do, if more clubs take advantage of this, where the band is playing. Yes, you can't feed off the audience. That's really hard. But if the band is able to play and perform in a venue, stream that out, that's going to bring jazz, that's going to bring all types of music all over the place and provide opportunities that may not have happened before. That's one way I'm definitely thinking about this. And the other thing too that is starting to happen, like when you and I were growing up, there were drive-ins, right? Remember the drive-in movies? Those were I like those. And then they went by the wayside, except in certain areas of the country. I think there's only maybe 10 left in the U.S. Well,
Wow.
they're repurposing them. See, this is brilliant. They're repurposing them and having musicians, live acts, whatever, on like a stage, and having people drive up, and having appropriate distance between the cars. And it's like a drive-in theater, and they're watching the show from their cars. I think
That's a
that's
great
brilliant.
idea.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
think
great idea.
brilliant, and I think more people should be taking note of that. And wherever there's empty space, build these things, because you know what? I think this would be, again, this is not going to go away right away. And if a virus like this, happens again, it's a different strain, and we don't have, a way to be immune to it. We've got to think outside the box. I think it would just be a brilliant thing for people to do, for developers to do, and that would keep music alive. And even though people are in their cars, it's a little hard to feel the energy from that, but people can certainly, respond or whatnot. But I think that would really be helpful.
I never heard of that one. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and like it used to be like it used to be called the Westbury Music Fair. I played a couple of gigs there. Now it's I forget the name of the bank that took it over, but that was a drive-in. That was a drive-in theater, and then they made it into a theater. Westbury Music Fair, whatever it's called now, a great theater. I loved playing that place. That one had a rotating stage. Very,
Uh,
very, yeah, it was really cool stuff. But anyway, that's I think some interesting ideas are going to come out of that. But I want to switch gears for a second. Yeah, let's talk about, how you formed your relationship with Jimmy Heath. What brought you to Queens College? I don't know if it was the opportunity to study with Jimmy Heath, but, how did you meet him, and how did that relationship evolve?
yeah, that was the catalyst for me going to Queens, actually, to have a mentor-mentee relationship with a jazz master. That was it. And also get a master's degree, of course. So my objective was to get that piece of paper, but more importantly, to build this relationship with Master Heath.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so when I first got there, it was just I was just another one of his students, and it was rough because I was in and out. I was on the road with Roy, so I was traveling quite a bit. But I made sure that I was prepared for my lessons. I did my big band assignments, and Donald Byrd was there too.
Yeah.
So Donald Byrd was teaching history at the time when I was there, but he left right in the middle. He had something went down. He left in the middle of the semester. But after graduating from Queens, I just kept that relationship with Master Heath. And we just got closer and closer and closer. Now I go to his house, hang out, we go to dinner. And then we started playing in Dizzy Gillespie band together. And just went from there, from just, student to teacher, student to like father-son relationship. And, spending hours at his house and talking on the phone and analyzing music, listening to his big band charts, things he was writing, and, you know, spending time in his music studio. And, 30 years of, you know, like I said, having him like a father, you know, crying, telling him stuff that wasn't right, you know, asking him for advice with everything. And, it's hard for me to believe that he's not here. Sometimes I'm like wishing I could like just pick up the phone and call him, or like just hearing he call me all Hart. Like, hey, all Hart, Jimmy Heath, you know. And you know, I was very fortunate, but I searched that out. I went for that relationship, you know, and the lessons that I learned from him they go so much further than music. You know, music was the reason for us coming together, but the life lessons, the example, just watching him, you know, and how he interacted with his wife Mona Heath and his daughter Roz, his son Jeffrey. Jeffrey passed, and you know, his son Entume, his grandson Michael and Joey. You know, I know the whole family. You know, and just the that interaction, or like sitting on the couch watching basketball with him, which I'm not a sports person. I might get into sports now just because Master Heath loved it so much. I might start studying it, but you know, on the phone would ring. I say this all the time. Sonny Rollins would call, or you know, Barry Harris, Milt Jackson at the time, and they would just talk. You know, they would just, you know, just like talking about whatever. Sometimes they would talk about music. Sometimes they were just like, "How you doing?" You know, and that really resonated to me. Like these cats really loved each other. You know, how's Mona? Oh yeah, she's good. How's the kids? You know, how's your wife? You know. And then they would talk about, you know, maybe they'll talk about John Coltrane or Tad Dameron or Take Six, or, you know, just all kinds of stuff just to hear these cats. That's what when I think about jazz or this music, that's what it is. It's like this family, it's this community kind of thing. And academia is fine. There's nothing wrong with colleges and teaching this music, but I think some of the historical, cultural parts of the music are not passed down. You know, a lot of great technicians and a lot of accomplished performers, but they're missing a lot of it because they haven't really studied. I mean, they take a jazz history course and they know about, you know, Congo Square, whatever, you know, and work their way out. But, you know, understanding about the culture, you know, how is this music developed and who are some of the key figures. If you know these names, why they're important. You're not, you know, why is Louis Armstrong important? Not just because of what he did as a trumpet player, what did he do in terms of society? You know, why is his name still spoken in such a high esteem? What was happening in the early 1900s in the United States? You know, that created this music that they call jazz, that comes out of King Oliver and Freddie Keppard and Jelly Roll Morton and those guys that come out of New Orleans. What was happening in that time? What was happening in the 20s and 30s, going into, you know, the world wars and stuff, when we had the big bands, not just the male big bands, but the female big bands, because, you know, that was happening when we were at war. What was happening? What led us into, you know, the bebop period, whatever, the 40s and 50s? What led us into the civil rights movement, the 50s and 60s, and so forth and so on, you know, because it's like a lot of them, they just associate with the music, but these CDs that they have, they don't associate it with what was happening at the time, you know, how Vietnam affected the music, how Korean War affected, how World War II, World War One, you know, all these events in time, you know, the stock market crash, you know, all this stuff affect artists, you know, just like it's going to be like what was happening during the time of the coronavirus, what was happening during the Trump years. You know, or what was happening during the Reagan years? What was happening, you know, and with all the presidents? What was happening during Jimmy Carter? We had the hostage thing that went down. You know,
9/11.
Yeah, what happened? What happened during Reagan? You know, the whole oil and gas thing that went down. You know, I mean, every period has something. And I'm not a historian where I can like really spit this stuff out, but I know how economics, social, political affects everything in society. It affects the artist. So I don't think they. I mean, and it's hard to do that in the curriculum. And it's on some level, students should be curious because, like us, they didn't. They have YouTube, they have Spotify, they have blah 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 blah. We didn't have all that stuff. We had tapes and records
Yep.
transcribed. And now they have CDs, they have slow down machines, they have play alongs. You know, Jamie Hammersaw was just creating that stuff. Now there's hundreds of it, and then you can go on YouTube and just play to your heart's desire. You know, you can hear every recording of all the things you are by everybody that's ever recorded. You know, and I know the guys, they have terabytes of music. Students are like, yeah, but how much of it do you know? You know what I mean? Can you sing it? Can you sing every solo on that recording and know what the drummer's doing, the bass player, the piano player doing? Can you really know that intimately? It's nice to have a bunch of music. That's nice. You have a library. It's like having a library full of the greatest books ever written, and you ain't read nothing, but it looks good. It's totally impressive when you walk in there. You're like, wow, you got Chaucer, you got Oscar Wilde, you have Edgar Allan Poe, you have, whoever great. I'm not a book person, but you have all this stuff. And you're like, well, yeah, I kind of checked out that one right there. I checked out that Mad Magazine.
I had Mad Magazine.
You know what I'm saying? I already know that Mad Magazine, but this is, I think they need to go back and do that kind of thing, and that's what I'm doing myself, so I can understand. Like, Mr. Heath just telling me that when he went to school in North Carolina, the black students finished in 11th grade, and the white students finished in 12th grade.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, things like that, and just some of the things from his upbringing, his experiences, of being drafted, and what he did to get out of it, those stories. Or he gave me a recording what Miles Davis sounded like before he lost his voice. So we know Miles Davis, like, yeah, he didn't sound like that before. Miles, I gotta find the CD. I have somewhere like, yes, and the next song we're gonna play, and I was like, Mr. Heath, that's not Miles. I said, yeah, that's Miles Davis.
Wow.
Yeah, I gotta find it. But it just stories he told me about hanging out with John Coltrane. It's not this mystical, this grand thing. It was like they were boys. They were in Philadelphia. They went to the library. They went to music together. They were hanging out with Benny Golson. They were just hungry jazz musicians wanting to study. Or when Charlie Parker played a week in Philly, and he borrowed Mr. Heath's horn every night. Mr. Heath would go at the end of the gig and get his horn, because if he didn't, his horn might not be there. Charlie Parker might pawn it. Things like that. And he said he would take, which I would never do now, because I guess Charlie Parker left the mouthpiece and everything on the horn. He said he would go in his basement and blow the horn after Charlie Parker and be like, none of the stuff that Charlie Parker was coming out when I was playing. He thought he was going to leave something in the horn. Yeah. I mean, so many funny stories like that. And just like I said, just being in his presence. Sometimes I would just sit on the couch and just not say nothing. I just wanted to be in his presence, and just hang out. And we would go to dinner at this place called London Lenny's for like 20 plus years. That's the only restaurant he would eat. And we did that all the time, got the same meal, fish and chips. He would get the baked potato with nothing on it, and a glass of Merlot. And, that's what we did. That's what we did all the time. And, so I miss that man so much. I mean, like.
Yeah, he was a great teacher. I was at Queens College for my undergrad around 1987, and he had just started the jazz.
That's when it just started. It just started, 86. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember I was allowed to be in the big band. I was playing trumpet. I was allowed to be in the big band at the time, even though I was an undergrad. And yeah, that music, it was awesome, but it was hard. It was really hard stuff to play, very challenging, but incredible. It was just really incredible. And I had taken some jazz improvisation courses with him as well. And yeah, Jimmy Heath was such a great guy. Was there? I don't even know if you could even answer this, but you were basically saying that just being around him and absorbing jazz history and the stories and all that kind of stuff. But was there one big music related lesson, um, I don't know, that you learned from him? Or is it just, is it just everything, just being around him?
I think it's just a combination of everything. I couldn't break it down to one thing, but if I had to say one thing, it was just like um, Mr. Heath respected time, and me saying that meaning he knew he wasn't going to be there forever,
Mm.
and he always said, "Man, I I outlived all my boys." He always said that, and he was always thinking and working on music. Like I would tell my students, I said, if I call Mr. Heath right now, two things are going to be happening. He's either practicing his saxophone or he's at the computer writing, and I will call him. What you doing, Mr. Heath? I just picked up my horn, or I'm sitting at the computer every time. I mean, that's what he did. He didn't waste any time. He was always thinking about music and appreciated time for a lot of different reasons because there were situations where Mr. Heath might not have been there when he was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he appreciated life. Certain situations in life that didn't allow him to um, be in the music scene the way he wanted to be, and so he was always appreciative of the opportunity to be able to work on music and to think about music and to express his love for music all the time. And I learned from him it's okay to be a man and to be sensitive, and it's okay to be vulnerable. Like that's one of the greatest traits that he had. I mean, he was a man, but he was very very sensitive, and that came across when he played. It comes across in his music and the themes, writing for his wife Mona's Mood, or the composition he wrote for Gemini or Gingerbread Boy. Wrote for people that he loved. I mean, he wrote a song for me called Like a Sun, composition rather. It's like very, selfless in some respects. And a man and a person and probably has faults. I wouldn't dare say any faults that he had because who am I to judge? But he was a person that again lived his life at one point, made his mistakes, saw what those mistakes were, and tried to be better as time went on. And that's what people saw. They saw that evolution of that great person. They saw the genius, but also the spirit of somebody that just, that had the most incredible smile, that always had a joke. He always had a nickname for somebody who was very serious about music, who left you spellbound at 93 years old, that he could still play that way, that he could still write that way, that he could still move that way, and like playing in his bands, just having him in front of the bandstand, everybody wanted to play his music on the highest level. Um, those guys is I'm sure there are more. Maybe I don't know, but the James Moody's, the Master Heath. I mean, even Slide Hampton for that matter. Um, the John Faddises, and I mean Paquito, De Rivera. Getting younger and younger, but some of the icons, they had something else, but it was just that love, the love for what they did. In a virtuoso, you had to be a virtuoso. You had to be on top of your game, and you had to live life. You had to live some life for that to come through your music. And Master Heath is like the greatest example of that. And just reverence for what came before you. He wrote one of my favorite pieces of his that I need to study. I have the score. It's called "Without You, No Me." You might have played it when you're in the band. That he wrote for Dizzy Gillespie. And every time we played, I was like, Master Heath, we got to play that every night. I'm sorry. Anytime we play, we have to play it because it just gave me goosebumps, because you can hear like his reverence for Dizzy Gillespie, who was his mentor. Beyond it just being a brilliant composition, he put all the bells and whistles in that arrangement. And I mean, yeah, and everything. And I'm so thankful that I had a chance to tell him this many times of like everything that I have as a professional musician. I got to thank him because he gave me so much. And I tell him this, I got this picture on my altar right now. I'm looking at it. I'm like, Master Heath, even though he's not on this earth right now, he's still looking out for me. Like I have a job, and because I was gonna go somewhere else to teach, and he said, "Nah, I ain't gonna stay at Queens College," and that was the best move. I listened to my mentor, and yeah, I could talk about him forever, but everything that's like, and when you talk about excellence, when you talk about somebody that's like that didn't walk around with a Bible or a cross around his neck, but was as spiritual as anybody who did, you know, um, somebody that was just appreciative of life because he understood how fleeting life was and how some things can be taken away from you. Who appreciated his wife, Mrs. Heath, who was always at his side and loved his kids. And yeah, so like I said, it goes way deeper than music. What I got from him, like my initial thing was just to be around him to get the musical information, which I wish I had gotten so much more from him. I really could have gotten a lot more from him, but the other gifts that he gave me are just some things I'm just starting to understand now.
Wow. And in our last interview, you had mentioned that there's going to be some recordings coming out from him very soon. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I know. I think they announced it, or I thought I read something. He did a recording with some singers. Um, I don't remember all the I don't remember the singers. So I don't want to mess it up. But some popular singers, and he did it. I mean, literally, he recorded that shortly before he passed. And I went to visit his house. I went to visit his wife. The week after he died, and they played it for me, and I was just sitting in the chair crying because it was just, first of all, just to think this guy was 93 years old and could play like that.
Yeah.
And just the honesty and just the level. It was beyond saxophone. It's not. I said the same thing about Frank West, and they transcended that part that I told you that we were trying to get to. That's where he was, and this recording is unfreaking believable. His sound is gorgeous. The compositions, he did the arrangements, and the vocalists sound amazing. It's going to be incredible. And we did a big band recording before that. I don't know if Verve is going to. I think this recording is coming out on Verve, so maybe Verve will put out the big band recording too, which is unbelievable, unfreaking believable. Some new arrangements he was working on that he never got a chance to record. So we did that. And you got to think this guy he did the big band. He did the big band in '92. He did the small group in '93. He bought his first house at 90. He was like, oh my God. Yeah. It's coming out soon. I think it's coming out in July. So look for that. And I know I just read something about it, but it's going to be on Verve, and I don't know what the name of it is going to be, but it's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And I regret not having been able to reach him to interview him for this podcast, before he passed, because, all of us that went to Queens College that, studied with him, revere him, and yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame on my part, but I'm going to totally switch gears for a second. And I wanted to ask you, like some saxophone types of things just for a little bit. So tone, who inspired you in terms of tone? How do you approach tone? People always ask me, what equipment does he use? That kind of thing. So if we could talk a little bit about that stuff.
Equipment, I use I play on a Yanagisawa. It's a solid silver Yanagisawa IO something. I don't know. I'm not into those serial. I can go get it and show you, but anyway, it's one of the latest models, and I was planning on a gold-plated silver horn that I had them make for me, and I was in Shanghai, and I went to this studio, and the guy let me play this silver one, and I fell in love with it, and I had them make me one. So they made me an alto and a soprano, so I've been playing on that. Mouthpiece-wise, I'm playing on the Van Doren B16, the A8. and the IO or OI ligature, and I play the traditional blue box number twos.
Oh,
And on soprano, I play the traditional. I play the V16 mouthpiece again. I think it's the same number on soprano, same ligature, and I play 2.5 traditional blue box. And the reason why I play softer reeds is because I play double lip. I play with the lip on the bottom and the lip on the top.
oh, I didn't know that.
So teeth doesn't they don't touch the mouthpiece at all. And I learned that from studying about Johnny Hodges, and that gets into your whole sound thing. The person that I fell in love with, the first alto player, of course, that I fell in love with Grover Washington Jr. Then, of course, trying to chase Charlie Parker and Sonny Stitt like that, people like that. Kenny Garrett was major, but then my teacher, I talked about Andy McGee, got me to listen to the older players, and that's when I discovered Johnny Hodges and just fell in love with just this guy's sound. It was just so warm and natural, and it was just so emotional and lyrical. So I was chasing that, trying to figure out how to get to that Johnny Hodges sound. I went through like 2 years of playing all kinds of mouthpieces, Lynx, Berg Lawson, just got Peter Ponzel, just Myers. I mean, I went through this whole trip. I still have a lot of them in the room for at least 2 years straight till I was playing the Selmer soloists, the old Selmer like Kenny Garrett and I think Steve Wilson and people play those. But they're older and they're hard to find and they're usually warped because they're, from years of playing. And I remember I was in Arizona for the altitude and I couldn't get this mouthpiece to work. I mean, I thought I was blowing into like a kazoo. And I switched to Van Doren. And then I went through a bunch of different sizes until I found the 8A8 works for me. And then I was playing the green box Java box for years. And I played them, but I wasn't happy. But I realized every time I picked up my soprano, I didn't have a problem. And I thought because it's just soprano straight, I said, I remember the guy, his name, one of my best friends, one of the greatest people at Van Doren, his name is David Gould. He's a clarinet player, but he's like the godsend to all the artists. He really helps us out. I said, David, I want to try the traditional blue box for alto. And I tell you, I went into the room, I put the reed on the mouthpiece and blew in, and it was like, there it is. Oh, okay. I mean, from the first note, I was like, for years, I could have been doing this for years. I would do all this head trips. But, sometimes you have to go. I had to go down Casino Boulevard, instead of go down Main Street. So, so that's my setup. And sound, for me, the ideal sound for the alto first is like Johnny Hodges, but then I try to hear, like, when I hear a really good flute player, like I mean, I don't know all the great flute players, but like people I've listened to, like Julius Baker or Rampal or Hubert Laws and people like that. It's this tube sound that you hear. There's no obstruction in sound. You actually hear sound around the walls, and it's round and it can be manipulated. It's like this ball that can be played with, like a ball that you can squish or you can expand. And that's how I try to think about it. But then I listen to great singers, like really, really great singers. And when you hear them, of course you have the head voice, the nasal voice, the diaphragm and all that stuff. And you hear that their cavity is totally open. You hear like, oh. And when I hear that, when I listen to the great horn players, that's what I hear. I can hear like even with my students now, I don't have to look at them. I can hear when they're biting on the mouthpiece. I can hear when their reeds are too soft. I can hear all this stuff just by the sound that's produced. And then I talk about syllables. So when I listen to Johnny Hodges, I hear like a total open throat, totally open, not too much pressure on the mouthpiece so the reed can vibrate, and the air and how he manipulates air in terms of speed of air, depending on what range of the horn he's in, and depending on what kind of colors that he wants to give. So the reason why I switched to double lip, and I talked to Frank West about this, and Jimmy Heath and James Moody, was because of Johnny Hodges, and because I could get to some of those things, but it wasn't as clean. They said, so I went through months of teaching myself how to do double lift. Like there was a great teacher that taught like Branford and Donald Harrison and those cats from New Orleans. I think his name was Alvin Baptiste.
Okay.
And I was gonna go down there and take some lessons with him, but it was during Katrina or after Katrina, and then he passed away. So I never. Oh, Wes Anderson from Wynton's band, and I never got a chance to study with him. But I asked Branford and Wes and this other young player named Stephen Gladney, a great tenor player. What did he teach them? And I tried to get it from them, and it was like a lot of trial and error because you have to build up kind of like a callus on your bottom lip from the teeth going in, but you have to do it from the top. And it's very painful. And what it teaches you though is like your pressure is not coming this way. The pressure is coming this way. So these are the muscles that are holding the mouthpiece in. This is just the mouthpiece in your mouth, but you should be able to pull the mouthpiece out. And because it's flesh on top, flesh on the bottom, it gives you more flexibility in terms of like colors and things like that. Those glissandos and bends makes it a lot easier. But you can't do that unless you really understand how to breathe. So because anytime the air is obstructed, you can't do vibrato. You can't do that because it just stops that. So when the first point you were talking about, I can only talk for a little while longer. I got another thing for you. But the only way you can get to those kind of things is doing the fundamental things, the long tones, and the first thing that I get my students to do is because without going into the altissimo range on the alto, you have 2.5 octaves, right? B flat to B flat, concert D flat to D flat. Then you have the next octave, and then you have a high F, another fifth, right? So each part of the horn in those 2.5 octaves, the more holes you close, the horn gets longer, and the air has a longer place to travel and go down. So it makes it a little easier to get those notes out. A lot of people have no problem getting those low notes out really big, but then when they get up to the higher, the horn gets really thin and sound, and then they think they need to change mouthpiece. They usually need harder reed. They need to change ligatures. That's when it gets into this rat race, right? I need to buy the $600 mouthpiece, and these reeds don't work for me. And a lot of times it's them fighting themselves, because if you're biting down on the mouthpiece, if you're clenching that mouthpiece, that means the reed can't vibrate. So that means how much air is going to go through a mouthpiece that you clench. So the idea is to get the air to move faster airstream as you go up to the top of the horn. So I get them to think of, these are things that I'm putting in my book too, of thinking that each note is a person, and every note on the saxophone is a democracy, and each person wants to be heard. Each person wants their equal say, and also each person on that horn, they're part of the same family. So when I play a low B flat or a concert D flat, and I go to the B natural or concert D, they should sound like they're the same family, meaning they're in the same house, they eat the same meals, they watch the same television shows. They're not distant cousins. Like when you hear it. So, and when I get the students to think that metaphorically, when they play, it's like, oh, you play a B flat. Yeah. Anyway, when you play that note, first we play it, and then we try to figure out how to get to. I'll draw a circle, like a circle on a page like this, and I put a dot in the middle. I'm like, this is the pretty spot. This is where we want to be. Now we could be up here, we could be down here, we can do all of this, but this is where it's like, this is where we want to be, right? So we have to figure out how to get to this pretty spot. And once we do that, we have to be able to do it all the time. So that means we have to think about what's going on. So what I say, okay, when you find that pretty spot and I go like this, that means more air, not louder, more air. Now I want you to feel what that feels like. What does the horn feel like vibrating in your hand? I got that from Mark Turner in Berkeley. He talked about vibration. I never understood it till later. Then once we feel it, what does it feel like in your diaphragm? What does it feel like in your chest? What does it feel like in your throat? What does the mouthpiece feel like? What does this feel like? What does all this feel like? And when you can get it perfect, take a mental snapshot. Like, okay, now you have a file cabinet, that's low B flat. So every time it's time for you to play low B flat, you should be able to do that right away without thinking. And we do that for each note on the horn. So by the time we finish, we have a file cabinet for each note to get to the pretty spot, right? That's the first part. And it takes a little while. I just have them do one octave till we can get it to sound the same, even. And then we move to the next octave to the top because it gets a little more tricky. And then we can go into the altissimo range later. But I get them to think about that. And that's everything. The long tones and sound, because you're doing a lot of things. You're working on breathing. You're working on posture. You're working on air production. You're working on intonation. Yeah. You're working on relaxing, because if you start to tight too much, then you start to get the shape. You start to get that wave. And the reason you're getting the wave is because the airstream is not steady. I talk about that. Like, you're flying in an airplane, and I say, what happens when the airplane hits turbulence? Of course, it's bumping up and down. What does the pilot do? The pilot can do a lot of things. The pilot can go under the turbulence, can go over top of the turbulence, or if he decides to fly through the turbulence, what does he do? Rev up the engines. So that's the same thing. When we hit turbulence in that long note, how we rev up our engine? Airstream becomes faster, and we go straight through. But you have to be able to do that all the way up your horn. So that's like from 20 years of teaching, and just like, if you want to have a good sound, and that's for me listening to people I think I have good sound. Johnny Hodges, Gary Barr, I mean, like Paul Desmond, and the people that I really like to listen to, and then the list goes on and on. It could be a trumpet player, it could be, Clifford Brown, it could be Freddie Hubbard, it could be Woody Shaw, it could be, like Eric Dolphy. I mean, of course, the list goes on and on. Good sound is good sound. So that's what I listen for. And I find a lot of young players today, they have a lot of incredible technique, but they don't pay so much attention to the sound anymore.
And sound is so important. Yeah, sound is so important because that's the first thing that people listen to.
And I'm the kind of person, like, I guess, like, again, going back to that underdog thing, I try to find something good in everybody. So when somebody said that person sucks or something like that, I'm like, gotta be something in there. So maybe I'm like, I don't appreciate that sound so much, but their melodic ideas are good or something. It was funny. I was walking past the park yesterday, and there was this tenor player in the park, and I was like, where is he at? I could hear him, and he was playing the Whitney Houston song, and I will always love you, that song, right? And it was out of tune. His vibrato was like very, very uneven, but it was this to the point where I enjoyed it. I was like, he tried to go for them high notes and he couldn't do it, but then he found a way to make it work. And I was like, that's the real thing. If I was like one of those guys, oh man, that cat, he can't play. He shouldn't be out in the park sounding horrible like that. I said, no. It's like, that's what you want. And I always tell my students, when you're in the subway, you hear these guys, they might not know the melodies, but they give you this. You don't play with none of this. You play with all of this. And it sounds good, but I don't feel you. I felt him. And then if I worked with him, I can build that other stuff up. But I don't want him to lose this.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing to teach.
It's there already. All that stuff is there. We're born with that stuff. It's just like just unlocking the door and letting it out.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I know I took up a lot of your time, and
no, it was my pleasure. I hope I said something.
Oh, no, are you kidding? This was an amazing interview. There were so many things here, and just again, this really is a great follow-up to the jazz saxophone history, because that point, knowing about not just, recordings and stuff like that, but also knowing what went on in the world at that time, and knowing the stories, and just your recollections with Jimmy Heath, and how he mentored you, and how you mentor other people now too. But also, just as a recap too, your mindset and your work ethic. It's the mindset. It's the, what? That sucked that person said that to me, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to move forward. And that's the thing that has given you success, and helped you to, move along your way in your career and your path, and help to mentor other people and affect other people. And I think this was really inspiring. It was definitely really inspiring to me. I'm certain it's going to be really inspiring to the listeners on the podcast. So again, before I go though, tell everybody how they can find you online. And also, you said there's a book coming out.
Oh, I'm working on the book. So I got a little while to go, but now that I said it, I have to really work on it some more. Yes. But my website is www.antoniohartmusic.com. That's my website, and that's the best way to reach me. Get in touch with me if anybody has any questions or comments. I'm open to exchange.
Awesome. Listen, Antonio, again, thank you so much. This was really incredible. Thank you again.
Thank you, dear. Good to see you again.
Yes.